thank you for coming to the Virtual Propane Expo. John and Mark are leading a cutting-edge technology company they're using technology and their decades of experience in the fuels industry to technology that's available to everybody and leverage that to help you and the fuels industry grow their business. John is the president and co-founder, and Mark is the president of the Energy Edge Advisory Group and founding partner of the whole Energy Engine company. And so both of them, in addition to this, have run lots of other businesses that were both involved in taking technology and digital marketing and digital tools to grow businesses, to grow entire businesses and then sell them off, grow businesses in our industry and sell them off. One of the interesting things that Mark, that I think John points out here is how these businesses and these tools that they've created have attracted just hundreds of thousands of customers for Energy Engine clients. That's the power of digital technology and digital marketing. And without further ado, I'm just going to ask John and Mark if you wouldn't mind just doing a short little intro of yourself, because I'd like to hear from you just a little bit about, if you don't mind, how did Energy Engine get to be where it is? I know that it's been the CEO of Suburban Propane said one time, life doesn't cut in straight lines, right? And business doesn't either. Sometimes we start a business, sell it off, and go to another one. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask John if you could kick it off and tell us a little bit about your background and where, how you got to where you're at. And then Mark, if you could follow on after that.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and thanks for having us this morning. I guess if I take myself back 20 years ago, I was actually working for a large energy company. Actually, part of that energy company owned a utility, electric and natural gas. So, hopefully the attendees in our virtual room today, probably good that we're virtual, so they don't throw anything at me and think of me as coming from the dark side. But the opportunity presents itself. I may want to share some of the relevance of that experience that then brought me to this part of the industry, the energy industry, the downstream fuels 20 years ago now, because I knew some things, or at least people said I knew some things about e-commerce, and wanted me to start working with e-commerce with fuel dealers, which I did. Actually, was quite successful in doing that for a mid-sized fuel dealer at that point. So I've been on the other side of the desk as well, if you will, actually running fuel dealers and propane marketing organization. So a lot of what we learned about digital marketing came from that perspective. Just how do we as dealers need to engage with customers? How can we use e-commerce, and how can we make it work, not just for the customers, but for us as dealers as well? So did that for about 10 years, and then lo and behold, just about 10 years ago now, we launched the Energy Engine. But it really came at the request from dealers that were familiar with some of the work that we had done, and said, "Hey, could you work with us so that we could engage with our customers in our local market online?" And at that point, e-commerce was fairly simple. It was really only the ability to take an order online. And since then, of course, it has become much more sophisticated as Amazon, as the granddaddy of the industry, has continued to lead us and even the other major e-commerce companies that many of us are familiar with, and customers advance the technology to the state that it is today, which has become quite a force for commerce in general. So I'm proud to say that, for the last 10 years, we've been working with propane marketers, fuel dealers, allowing them to engage with their customers online and helping them to grow their businesses through e-commerce. With that, Mark, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for everybody for joining today. We appreciate the opportunity. My background is quite a bit different than most folks in the industry. Got into the downstream fuel market in the late 90s. Prior to that, I was an investment banker working for venture capital and private equity firms, building technology companies, getting funding, running the businesses, scaling the businesses. So I have a background in technology, but then I got into the energy space partly because I had a weird reference from a friend to join a large publicly traded company, but I had a background in my education of commodity management and trading. So I fell into energy, loved it. First thing I noticed was that there was a real lack of technology. Even in the late 90s and early 2000s, the industry was slow to adopt technology. It seemed like a great opportunity for me to apply my trade. So I worked founding and starting and funding some businesses, technology companies in this space. Many exist today, some were sold off, and then started consulting and providing those services of how to build and scale a software business within the energy space with very, very unique needs. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. I've had a lot of clients, technology clients, but I also do some dealer consulting as well. I worked for some of the majors in propane, Suburban being one of them, back in my early days in the industry. So I have a pretty broad view of the industry. I have a broad background, but really just trying to help John push this consumer-facing technology into the fuel business where it's really, really needed, certainly at the moment. So that's my short bio there.
Yeah, well, everything going on this year is just so much changes going on. I'd like to get into that and how you see that sort of plays into things. But before we do that, if you could both take a minute and share a story about a company that you've helped in the recent past with taking the digital tools that are available now to help them grow in the fuel space, maybe something in the last 10 years. If you had a story on something like that, that'd be great.
We have endless stories. John, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. I guess the most gratifying thing for me, while we do provide e-commerce software, a platform for dealers and marketers to use under their brand. That's our business. That's how we make a living. But quite honestly, the thing that I enjoy most is seeing the success of our clients. And I'm thinking about one client in particular, actually located in northern New Jersey, become friends with over the years, and running a traditional, in his particular case, a heating oil business, a fuel business, a very traditional business, automatic customers service, very good commercial business. And he wanted to expand, his business, saw an opportunity with technology, didn't know a thing about it, quite honestly, but he kind of trusted me. And we talked about, some of the things that he needed to do in order to, start engaging with customers. And I guess the most gratifying thing that occurred over the journey that he's been on and we've been on with him together is a few years ago, he called me up and, he's looking at an acquisition and to actually expand his service territory. And then the bottom line of the conversation was, hey, he said, I've been acquiring customers, literally. He sets a target for himself each year that's better than 1,000 in terms of new customers that he wants to acquire and add to his business via e-commerce. So he's been pursuing it and he's become a student of this entire e-commerce technology. And in looking at a potential acquisition, he was asking me, because he knew I'd been in his position before. And he said, hey, how would you look at this? The market, would this be a good acquisition for us, and so forth? Where he netted out was he said, called up a couple of days later, he said, John, I decided not to pursue it, because if I did pursue it, this happened to be a company that was largely an on-demand or what we used to refer to as a COD or will call business. About 80% of the business was that. So he knew what he was buying, and he said, I really wouldn't want to get involved in negotiations with it, because he said, based upon what I've learned over the years, I can now acquire customers cheaper via e-commerce than I can by going out and buying them. And that had never really occurred to me up until that point when he made that comment to me. And I thought, wow, that's pretty telling in terms of, how he has taken the tools that we provide and really turned it into a machine where he doesn't feel that he needs to acquire in order to grow his territory, either service area or within his service area. He has the tools to be able to attract that customer via e-commerce cheaper than if he was going to buy those customers themselves. So that's my story, Bill.
Yeah, that's a great story. And, it just reminds me, a lot of times in our fuels industry, we might not always remember, hey, we're in a commodity delivery business. And we might say that we know that, but well, what is Uber in? Aren't they commodity delivery also? It's just same day orders to deliver something from here to there, or Amazon. Aren't they kind of a commodity delivery business too, where they're just delivering stuff, right? And you look at, just take Uber, for example, for just a minute, they do 18 million same day orders. They went from 0 orders to 18 million same-day orders a day. Not now with coronavirus, it's dropped a lot, but once that bounces back, I think it should probably bounce back. Or Amazon went from zero orders, zero deliveries to millions a day, and even more now with this coronavirus thing. So, in short order, right? I mean, it took how long for Sears and Kmart or Sears, for example, to build their empire, right? It took decades. And then in very short order, Amazon, for example, was able to grow a business that may actually dwarf the combination of Sears and Kmart and others. So using technology, right? And so would you say that you're kind of helping take the technology and concepts and ideas that help these other companies grow and packaging it for the fuels industry?
Yeah, let me grab that one. I think what's very obvious to most people is that e-commerce, digital commerce, digital engagement in general, not even commerce, just doing business in general, even communicating, is all living in our phones, right? And those habits and patterns are being taken to places where they haven't been before. The challenge for the fuel industry at the moment is not that people were slow to the switch. It's not that people are ignorant or resistant. It's just that we had a very stable model in this industry of telephone and snail mail and very tactile relationships for a long time, generations. And starting in 2007 with the advent of the smartphone and the emergence of Amazon and other online retailers, it wasn't about what are the fuel companies in my area doing. It was my consumers are making all these crazy demands. Where are they getting these ideas from? And it was the shopping experiences they were getting elsewhere that they were drawing back into the fuel industry, which put us back on our heels because we had never even thought to engage that way. We actually thought for a long time we would be inoculated for that. So what we're trying to do in our company is provide this Amazon-like experience for consumers, for fuel dealers. So essentially taking an experience that consumers like and demand and expect elsewhere and allowing fuel dealers to be in that same business and trying to help them do that very quickly. As you said, it was already accelerating and now it's at unimaginable speeds that people are moving digital. So yeah, that really is, we're really, if we look at our central reason for existing, is how can we provide tools to the fuel dealers, propane and heating oil and others, that align that experience that they can provide with what a consumer is getting 5 minutes later from Ally Bank or Esurance or Amazon or anybody else.
Right. Okay. All right. So if you don't mind, Mark, if you could jump into maybe a short story about how you implemented something like that with a company. I mean, because really, what do we want to know? We want to know how can we do something like that, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so I have a great story, very quick, but it really is an analog for dozens and dozens of our customers in the propane and fuel industry. I have a dealer client, my only dealer client at the moment, in mid-state New York, propane primarily, but they do have heating oil. Not a real large company, 10, 12,000 customers, but a very smart company. And they were caught in that trap that most dealers are, which is you have a net attrition of 0 every year. You hope and pray that you can market and sell and gain X amount of customers, and you lose just about the same amount of customers. And if you get to 0, you're the happiest dealer in the world. They had some new executives join the company, and one of them was a young woman who was just not going to accept the fact that reaching net 0 every year was going to be a goal. She couldn't wrap her head around it. So we talked. And I said, what you should do is look at your digital ewecosystem. You're in an area that's mixed rural, mixed urban. I would say probably a lot of internet users. So she went on a search. It was not easy because there weren't a lot of vendors at that time, 5 years ago. She started off with portals for existing customers, got a really, really good portal in place, then deployed the engine on top. So she had sort of side by side. She had the portal for her full service, keep fill type customers to pay their bills and whatnot, and then use the engine for growth for online consumer shopping. And since she deployed the engine, they're growing real numbers, almost 20% a year, repeated year after year. They're in their third year of almost 20% growth at this point. And it's really all being driven online. The best part of the story is not only are they getting kudos for having a great online experience, they've been able to really, really refine their CSR team to not just be phone operators all day. They didn't let anybody go. They've redeployed them in other parts of the business, adding value. So e-commerce and digital engagement was able to satisfy a consumer, grow their business very, very substantially and turn their CSRs into really productive revenue generating employees.
Thank you. There's a story about Domino's Pizza, right? They do their delivery business. So, they make that connection. And, every single thing that they did was all over the phone. Every order was over the phone. And their share price started to crater about 10 years ago. And they had a meeting like what you expressed right there, where the leadership says, hey, let's consider a new way of engaging customers. And so they did. They created this online digital format for people to order, starting on a website, then parlayed to an app, kind of like the way Amazon did things. And now they say that 80% of their orders, more than 80%, comes through a digital platform. And so they have less phones ringing, and I didn't believe it, quite honestly. So I actually went to our local Domino's to check this out to see if it was legitimate. And sure enough, I asked the millennial who is the manager, hey, where's all the phones? Where's all the phone calls? And he looks at me like, okay, boomer, right? We don't really do that anymore. Everybody just orders online or through an app. The phone doesn't really ring very much anymore. And it was funny because things are changing without us maybe even knowing they're changing, right? And I think that sometimes in our industry, we're so busy. We're a busy industry. I mean, you guys know, you've been in all the offices. Our offices are busy. The staff is busy. We don't have extra people. And we get in our bubble and we get used to doing things the same way. Like you said, our industry has been doing things a lot the same way for decades. And maybe we don't need to do that as much. There's a lot of things that are changing outside, right? And so, when you look at where our industry is now, and when you look at other industries and saying, hey, what can we learn from other industries? Where do you go? What are some other industries or some other storylines you see out there, or things that you're like benchmarking us toward? What do you see, and how do you, who would that be?
Well, and Bill, so much of our world has changed. Certainly, you're absolutely right about that, and really much more so since the beginning of March with this entire pandemic, around us. And one of the things that we've seen is this huge acceleration, digital engagement that people are doing all around us. And if all of us and, everybody that's attending the session today just thinks about the things that we've done over the course of the last 3 months that we didn't do before. I looked at telemedicine as, kind of a parallel to our business in certain respects, where it's an it's a consumer-facing technology that, the medical industry wanted people to engage with, and it's been available for a while. The insurance companies wanted people to visit their doctor via online because it was cheaper for them too. And, and more people were going, it was growing. One of the statistics that I ran across earlier in the pandemic was was in Connecticut. Up in Connecticut, the Yale New Haven Health System, I believe is the correct name for it, was going from like 25 average virtual visits a day to better than 2,000 in the course of just a few weeks. Now, admittedly, that was all driven by, what was going on around us at that point. We didn't want to go to doctors' offices because that's where the sick people were. And so, for the things that we had to get attended to or just have a doctor take a look at, all right, let's try this telehealth and see, if it really does work. And my God, thousands and thousands and thousands of people found out it was simple. It was easy. I could get an appointment the same day. I could see the doctor. I could use, my phone or my laptop to be able to essentially do a Zoom meeting or some sort of a screen share so that they could see what the problem was with me. They could diagnose it. They could prescribe if that's what was needed, all in the matter of about 30 minutes. And I didn't even have to leave my living room. So that's just one industry. You look at what supermarkets have done, in terms of not only curbside pickup, but delivery. They were, as new stores were being built, they were set up to be able to accommodate this. And then all of a sudden COVID happened and they were overrun immediately. I saw one of the leaders from Food Marketing Institute, which is kind of the granddaddy trade organization worldwide for food marketers, make the comment that in 3 months worth of worldwide pandemic, it accelerated the adoption of these digital technologies to what they had expected wouldn't occur for 5 years. and it happened in just 3 months. So that's happening all around us. And really, as an industry, we're no exception. Mark tells me this, every week at least. I hear it from him. We're no different. The consumers for our clients are behaving the same way as consumers are for other industries. And we saw it actually beginning about mid-March, quite by accident. I was working with one of our clients, and we were doing a screen share. He was having some issues. I don't even remember what they were at that point, but I happened to see on his screen that he had these new customer registrations coming in. It happened to be on a Saturday, no less. And it was March, so we're at the end of the heating season. You don't normally get new customers coming into the business at the end of the heating season. And anyway, say anything about it on that call. We were focused on what we were doing at the time, but I couldn't let that go. And a few days later, I started looking at our entire network just to see what was happening. And what did I find? But literally thousands of new customers coming to register to our clients at the end of the season. And it was the same thing Mark's been telling me. Our industry is no different. Consumer behavior, if they're engaging digitally with their grocery shopping or their telehealth, they're going to do it with their fuel as well. And sure enough, we saw that at this point, or actually up through the end of March, there was a 69% increase in new customer registrations from the beginning of March to the end of May this year compared to the same period last year. So strong, aggressive growth, unprovoked by anything other than the consumer behavior that was changing at an accelerated pace.
Okay, so Mark, in that case, how do you see fuel dealers taking advantage of this and positioning themselves now and into the future?
I think, John and I have the good fortune of speaking a lot to the industry, writing a lot of articles. So we get a lot of direct feedback in a room from dealers, and we're working with dealers all the time. One of the things that I think is a real source of optimism is that this pandemic has created a really interesting consumer dynamic, which we haven't seen for a while, which is loyalty. That consumers of all kinds, include certainly fuel consumers buying an essential service, really are looking at the reliability, the security, the supply chain integrity of fuel dealers, being local. Even if you're an MLP, you still have a presence in a community. That really plays into this sort of fear that people have of not being able to get things. So that positioning is so strong. The story that we've been telling that sort of fell on deaf ears for a long time with consumers suddenly is resonating. So that's a huge positive. The other huge positive is for positioning for this industry is we've been in the contactless business forever, right? So other than service technicians, we deliver fuel, we don't typically have a lot of human contact. So that is also really in our favor. We were kind of pioneers in touchless, and we didn't even know it. So I think that from a positioning standpoint, the industry is really, really in a good spot. I think the one thing I will say, though, this is not a negative, this is just maybe a challenge to the dealers out there, is that when people ask us about, and Bill, I say this with all due respect, think of another industry. We can talk like John did intellectually about these other industries. Fuel dealers have a habit, though, of thinking that their business is somehow wholly unique, that there's no real sort of analog out there for what the fuel dealers do. And that might be true for an operational perspective, but that's a very risky mindset from a consumer perspective, because while operationally this industry is unique, consumers are not unique. They will not be kind to you if you don't deliver an experience that is consistent with what they expect and demand, especially from a commodity. So to get caught up on our own propaganda about being very special or the last milkmen, which I hate hearing that, although milkmen are coming back now. I just want dealers to think about the consumer. Don't think about operations. Break that sort of addiction to operations. And we're in the consumer business now more than ever.
Yeah, that's really a great point. The consumer is the starting point rather than our operations being a starting point. And I too have seen that. And really taking it from that perspective, I think what you said, it helps clarify that a lot. Especially a lot of us in our industry, when we talk about a digital ecosystem, it just doesn't resonate. But if we say, well, all the consumers are the same, they want to shop the same way. They've been trained to shop a certain way. They want to shop in a digital format kind of way because that's easier. That they don't want to go down to the fuel dealer. They don't want to stop in, especially during this scenario that we're in right now. So when it comes to threats and risks that are facing the fuel dealers the fuel marketers, oil and propane. When you consider that, how do you see those threats, and how do you suggest that fuel companies address them these days?
I'll take a run at that. I think, one of the things I hear from our dealers and prospects that are, considering becoming energy engine clients is, is this electrify everything, and the, risks from electric utilities. It's hard for us to pick up one of the trade publications without seeing an article written every month about something happening in a particular location. I think that's real. That's a risk for us in the industry if we don't adapt. And like I mentioned in my introduction, I came from that industry. Utility scale electricity and natural gas. And, it's been 20 years ago for me, but I was there when the smart meter was making its appearance. And the smart meter, and this is probably a parallel for us in this industry as well, because the smart meter was being introduced as an operational enhancement for grid stability and to be able to cut costs in terms of the meter readers that used to walk from door to door and write down what the meter readings were on your electric meter so they could send you a bill. Now, all of a sudden, all this was being done digitally, and the smart meter became a two-way communications device. A smart meter is really a fuel monitor. Yeah. In our language. It's really the same thing. The point, though, in terms of what the electric industry has done is they've turned that operational tool, that operational piece of equipment, that monitor, if you will, into consumer-facing technology. So now they still get the operational enhancement from it, everything that they intended to do from the very start. But now they use that data that comes out of that monitor, much as you can use a fuel monitor, as consumer-facing technology. It lets me know certainly what my bill is every month. It lets me know how efficient I am relative to my neighbors, with similar size homes and so forth, or maybe not as efficient. But it also, what do we expect? Mark mentioned touchless and reducing friction. What's the biggest problem we have with our electric utility? It's where we go and flip the light switch and the lights don't come on. That's when we have a problem. But even that, and I witnessed that recently too, where they've taken that smart meter with that two-way communication, and they knew, in my particular case, that power had been interrupted to a water pumping station that served our community. And all of a sudden, we were, a couple of us that were on the board were being notified, hey, we've got a power outage there. We didn't have to call them. We didn't have to say, hey, we're out of power. We didn't have to figure out if it was a problem with power or it was a problem with the pumps. The smart meter told the utility what the problem was. They told us literally within a minute that there was a power outage, that it was only affecting a small group of people. Here's when we expect to have the power restored. So at least we knew at that point. We didn't have to even interact with them. What made it even better was they beat their restoration time by about 2/3. Again, sent a text, said, hey, we got the power restored. Sorry about this. There was an animal that got into the electrical system, but the power should be on. If for some reason you're not seeing what we're seeing, that the power is back on, here's what you do. Of course, the power was back on, problem solved. Even in the worst situation that you have with your electric company, they made it touchless. They made it easy. They used technology, consumer facing. And after that, as much as I didn't like, going through not having water in our community for a period of time, it was much easier to take because of the use of that consumer-facing technology. The same thing happens with e-commerce and other types of technology that are available to our dealers that allow us to really take what otherwise could be a risk for electricity and simply adopt the consumer-facing technology that the customer is looking for, that they're getting elsewhere, put it to work. And, and while there are operational certainly gains as well, the consumer-facing gains are more important because you can get the growth, and in the entire process, you wind up becoming more profitable as an operator itself. So there's a win-win-win in terms of using this consumer-facing technology and really being able to successfully compete with some of the threats that we have, trying to take a bite out of our industry.
Okay, great. So when it comes to our industry, some people say that maybe we're falling behind or we've fallen behind. And, is it possible for us to catch up? That's a question that I hear. And so I'd ask, for your thoughts on that. Mark, as far as can we catch up as an industry?
Yes, I'm not a Pollyanna, but I am definitely optimistic that this industry can react. The reason I know that for sure is I see it, right? So the joke is when we were selling e-commerce software 7 years ago to fuel dealers, they weren't really sales calls. They were more arguments and fistfights. Like, how dare you say that we're going to do this online? We're not an online business. Amazon can deliver fuel by the mail. Now it's the opposite. And now our phone rings and the outreach is there and people show up for sessions and they really want to hear and engage. They realize that it's not a threat in and of itself, the consumer moving online. So I see dealers making the shift very, very quickly. We see dealers making a bigger shift now that the coronavirus has occurred and consumers are making different demands. And the portal that takes payments is not nearly enough of it anymore. They need a bigger e-commerce ecosystem. I think the question will be, direct answer to your question is yes, we have fallen behind the consumers. But as I always tell dealers, who hasn't fallen behind consumers? Every industry in the world is chasing the consumer right now. The minute you catch them, somebody else has pulled them further ahead. So we can't think about it being behind. We have to think that, like all other industries, the consumer really is in charge. They're dictating the experience that they want. It's a very fast moving goalpost. Start off, get in the e-commerce space, get into digital engagement, take that step to build that ecosystem, and then work to deliver the same experience. But we're playing catch up just like everybody else, and we'll get there. There are smart people in this industry. The consumers that are still in propane and heating oil, they want to stick around, but they're just asking us to tweak what we do, and we can do that. It's not that hard to do. This technology is not difficult to deploy. It's not like back office software that's really disruptive. It's inexpensive. It's easy. So I think that we'll get there. We'll catch up. We're already on our way. The mindset in the industry has shifted. We see it, and we're very encouraged by it. Not because of our business, but because we want this industry to thrive.
Some of the questions that might come up, how does this impact our businesses with regards to automatic customers? That's the first question that seems to come up when discussing this type of technology, or at least among the first. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's the question we get every single time we are in a room or in a sales call or anything, is that if I put this e-commerce site up, Mark, for will call propane or COD, heating oil, or whatever it might be, I'm going to cannibalize my entire automatic business. I am here to tell you, and we have copious amounts of data to prove this, and dealers who will chuckle at it. It is mythology. I'm not dismissing the fear, but it is mythology. I think that is misrating consumers and not giving them enough credit. Consumers understand the difference between a lower price online experience and a higher price premium experience. The consumers in the propane and heating oil business understand the difference. They're smarter than we think. So when we launch e-commerce in either propane or heating oil, we don't see a cannibalization of the full service or keep fill customers. We actually see the opposite. We see a marginal 2 or 3% growth in the automatic keep fill side, because as consumers are driving their way into the e-commerce sites of these dealers, they're being prompted with really smart marketing language, well-crafted language, to say, hey, listen, if you want these other amazing benefits from us, then click here and go over here. So it is mythology. It just doesn't happen in the real world. I was on the phone with a dealer this morning, and they're in both businesses, and you have to learn to manage that, but it's not a real risk. It's a perceived risk.
Interesting. Okay. And then as far as the impact on CSRs and the whole office, you touched on that earlier. Is there anything you'd add as far as how this whole shift toward a digital e-commerce type world, how does it affect and impact the CSRs and the call centers?
So one of the things I wanted to mention before I forgot, because you went into data after, the client I referenced in mid-state New York went from, they have a fair amount of will call and COD in their rural areas. I mean, thousands of customers, and that phone would blow up, right? And so when they deployed the e-commerce software, they went from 0 will call orders online to now over 75% of their will call orders are going through e-commerce. Think of the burden that takes off a CSR. So if you have 2,000 customers who are on will call and 1,500 of them are going through that's 1,500 customers. But if customers are ordering 2 or 3 times a year, that's 5,000 phone calls. And when we did the analysis there, each phone call was costing them about $6. They have to we'll call customer on the phone. How much do you want? I got to go talk to the dispatcher. Can we call the driver and pull them off of their route? It was costing them $6 to $10 for these 5,000 phone calls, and quickly do the math on that. A huge impact on the productivity of CSRs. The reduction of customer service costs is extraordinary, whether it's e-commerce like we do it, or a portal, or ideally and optimally a combination of those two things. You walk in that office in the middle of the winter, they have 10,000 customers, and it's quiet. It's not that calamity that you would normally experience in a fuel office. So it's a huge impact on CSRs and the cost of customer service.
Hey, Bill, if I could just add to Mark's comment, the other thing about it is time of day when orders are placed. We looked recently at our entire network in terms of timestamps on orders, and found that better than 1/3 of the volume was done when the offices are not open. So, this is business that you could potentially lose by not having 24/7 e-commerce availability. I was surprised, honestly, how much of the volume was happening after hours, because people are, they're opting to engage with the businesses when they want to, when it makes sense for them. And, so now in terms of operations in the office, the boss may be coming in the morning, and there may be all these orders that came in overnight that are already, even, depending upon how you're handling it through a dispatcher or whether or not you're totally automated, orders could potentially already be out for delivery on the trucks before the call center, really gets going in the morning, because people have placed them overnight when they wanted to.
Yeah, it sounds like things are changing, whether we like it or not. The consumer is the king, and the consumer wants a different type of experience. And that's happening outside our industry and inside our industry. Those that serve the consumer get more customers, right? And it sounds like that's happening inside of our industry too, using
Sure.
the platforms that you're talking about. So as far as getting in touch with both of you, here's your website, energyengineus.com. As far as getting in touch with you and connecting with you, what would be your thoughts? What would be your suggestions?
There's a contact us button on the website for direct comment. I would invite anyone to visit the website if you want to get a feel for what e-commerce looks like in your business, and what it really means in terms of that interaction with the customer. There's a short 60-minute essentially online demo that's being shown right there that you can just watch at your convenience, and at any time. Matter of fact, earlier this morning, Mark and Adrian were on with another client doing a custom online demo, specifically suited to their business, and the unique characteristics of e-commerce within the fuel environment that is so important to how we do business.
Great. Okay, so we can connect with you right up here on the contact us.
Yep.
And there's also some other forms of communication videos and stuff that people can watch. Great. Okay,
Yep.
Super. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. If there was one last thing you'd want to share with the fuels industry, what would it be at this point?
My summary comment would be, take a look at your technology ecosystem, not just e-commerce, but, all the consumer-facing technologies that are available to you as a fuel marketer, and make sure you are making contemporary decisions to serve the consumer that is trying to buy from you today, and make it easy for them, to buy from you. And, we've seen it now with our clients in terms of e-commerce. You make it easy for them to do business with you, they will do business with you.
Yeah. America has moved to a place, maybe trained a lot by some cases Amazon, where you can just order whenever you want to, not just when the office is open. And so having a similar type format where people just order from you whenever they want really seems to be the direction that everything's heading. So thanks so much for everyone listening. This has been Energy Engine. You can reach them at energyengineus.com. And there's more information that you can access right there on their site if you want to, just to connect there first, read up, and then schedule a demo and contact us right here in the top right hand corner. Super easy to get in touch with. Also, they have a booth right here in the expo. And thank you guys for sponsoring this entire expo. You know, it's without sponsors like yourselves, you know, the industry is not going to continue to move forward. It's a process where we continually have new leadership, new people involved, and we need to continue to learn and connect and transact. And the expo is really designed for companies like yours and for the industry. So thanks for supporting this, and we will be in touch. Thanks a lot for being here.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.